21st Century Downtown. First, I'd like to thank everybody for coming for Small Growth at our 15th annual summit. I'm Scott Jones, publisher of Long Island Business News, and this is our distinguished panel for today. I'm going to ask each person to start. I guess I'll start with Brian. He will do a quick intro, talk a little bit about himself, and then we'll end the intros with Chris, and then Chris will go right into his PowerPoint presentation. And then I have a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. All right, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Hardy from the Village of Farmingdale. I've been there 6 years, the village administrator, clerk, treasurer, all the titles. I run the day-to-day operations of the village. I report directly to the board, the mayor and the board of trustees. And we've been very fortunate to have a very willing political system in Farmingdale. And that's one of the keys to re-emergence as a village. Backing up a little bit, the mayor was on the day, as you probably heard him speaking a little bit earlier, about the village, and it's a wonderful little place. We have about a $6 million budget. We have all the services. We don't do our own garbage collection. That's under the town of Oyster Bay. We have a municipal agreement with the town of Oyster Bay to do lighting repairs, and we have the police department is covered by the county of Nassau. But virtually everything else, we have a fire department, a village fire department, we have a village water department. So we have all the functions of a major municipality with those exceptions that I noted that function on a day-to-day basis. So all of you may be very familiar with that, somewhat familiar with that, or a little bit familiar with that. The town, when I got there 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, was in pretty much distress. Main Street was kind of derelict. There was derelict properties by the train station, and there was a BOA grant study underway at the time to put together. Do you want me to go into this now, or is that okay?
You go into it.
Okay.
Yeah. A little bit.
The BOA grant study underway, that was the beginning of the re-emergence, and it was a community-based planning effort. Sicardi and Schiff at the time, which is now VHB, were the planners that were contracted to take us through that planning process. Did a wonderful job. Engage the community. This has been a very important component to the re-emergence of farming. Just to highlight a couple of other things, after the grant was done, there was a federal grant through the County of Nassau on the sign light owning program. It's federal money coming in 80-20. To provide new sign lights and awnings for businesses on Main Street. And Terry Dukes is here from the County of Nassau. We work with Terry very, very regularly on this program, and it's been a wonderful stimulus to a re-emerging downtown. When people see things starting to change, they jump on board, and all of a sudden it becomes like a snowball. And then after that, the properties that we have by the train station, which were in really bad condition, the developer came in. He'd been in for a while. He was going to put condos up initially in a hotel. The market changed, as it did in Patchogue. Ironically, they were on the same kind of timeline of development that we were. And they changed that to residential apartments and retail. So it has worked wonderfully well. The planning that went into this from the HB indicated that we could get 375 units of housing in the village with minor changes in traffic patterns, and it's worked really wonderful. So the change and the density increases that the planners put forward has worked extraordinarily well. The IDA, as the mayor had mentioned earlier from the dais, was a very integral part of this. 6 or 7 or 7 out of the 8 new developments we have in the village have IDA approvals and are functioning very, very well. We have one of our developer people here in the audience as well, and he can attest to the fact that they have about 98% occupancy of maybe, hopefully it's 100%. But to see that change, and then when I hear people ride, they say, we ride past your railroad station, we recognize it now, we didn't see it in the past, and now it looks great now. You know, in the past it was this derelict property. So you can see that what moved into those properties were young, vibrant parts of it. 10% of it's affordable. So that is a very important component in this. I call it seamless and sightless about affordable housing, so it's because it's integrated into the entire part of the projects. They're interspersed throughout the building, so nobody knows who the affordable is. So I think that takes any stigmatization away from affordable housing that one might have a preconceived notion about. There is nothing to be had about a preconceived notion in this particular case. In our particular case, I think affordable housing overall works very well when it's integrated with market rate housing. So I think it's been a wonderful experience for us, and we continue to re-emerge. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Warren.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. My name is Warren Tackenberg, and I'm the former mayor of the village of New Hyde Park, and I've been the Executive Director of the Nassau County Village Officials Association for the last 16 years. The Nassau County Village Officials Association is made up of 64 villages in Nassau County. We represent almost 495,000 people. I think that I would say this to anybody, especially young people in the room, if you're interested in getting into local government, get involved in different projects, because the most important product that you have then is name recognition. The reason I say that is because many years ago, more years than I care to remember, I was the president of the Civic Association and I couldn't give the job away. I would have loved to give it to anybody, whether you were infirmed or it didn't matter to me, but I couldn't give it away. And all of a sudden a small group came to me and said, you know, you've been involved here for 6 years, would you like to get to local government? And I was elected to the Village of River Park Village Board. I was on the board for 24 years and I served the last 8 years as mayor. So I have some knowledge of work in government. When I retired from my own job in 2001, or 2000 I should say, and then I retired as the mayor in 2001 as well, the village officials came to me and said, would you take on this job? So I've been on for the last 60 years. What makes me very proud to be involved with the Village Officials Association is that not only do we speak for the residents, but we also speak for those village officials who all have their own involvement in different areas of the county as well as their own jobs. Now, I'm going to leave it with this for the time being. When we saw those elected representatives up on the dais this morning, in my eyes, they represented the 97 villages on Long Island and the 14 towns. And they speak for all of them. I got the sense from listening to them that the key that they were giving us today was the bottom line is that they have their fingers on the pulse of the community. They know what's good for their representative community. And I think sometimes that's misapplied when an issue comes before a municipal board, and what the state's villages, they may say no to the project. Not because they're NIMBYs or not because they're antisocial, it's because they don't feel that particular project is in the best interest of their community. They'll sort them out and come up with it, and if you heard there this morning, they all have success stories. So I don't want to dwell on that, it'll come out in our discussion this morning, but I thank you very much for inviting me here and listening to my story.
Thanks, Warren. All right, now we have Chris from New York Wireless Association.
Good morning. I want to thank Vision Long Island and our sponsors, AT&T and Addison. I thought what I could do is frame the discussion, at least with respect to wireless services and creating wireless downtowns, with a PowerPoint presentation, walk through some facts, and hopefully get us to a point where we can have this collaborative conversation between industry interests, constituent interests, and municipal interests in this particular area. As Scott mentioned, my name is Chris Fisher. I'm president of the New York State Wireless Association. I'm also a private practicing attorney. I've practiced in this space for over 20 years now, and I've been president of the association for the past 4 years. Our association is made up of private sector principally. A lot of names you would know, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile. Some of the infrastructure providers you may know, Extenet, Crown, American Tower, and then a lot of names you probably wouldn't know, and these are the small businesses that make up our industry and really are helping build out the infrastructure that delivers wireless services. They include construction personnel, engineers, and yes, attorneys. When you look at wireless and where we are, just to give you a sense of how important this is and what we would like to refer to it now as an essential service. Wireless, about 30 years ago, kind of if you look back and think about the 80s and Gordon Gekko and Wall Street, it was a big clunky phone, and that was kind of cutting edge luxury item at the point in time. 10 years ago, iPhone came out. That's okay, I'll try to speak up there.
No, it's just a loud voice behind us.
Okay. 10 years ago, really was the introduction of the iPhone, and even for me, it's hard to think that that was 10 years ago. In some ways, it seems like yesterday, and in other ways, it seems so long ago. Where we are now, we can talk about a little bit further, is really a massively changing ecosystem when it comes to the means by which wireless services are provided, methods and the benefits to consumers. And what I hope to convey just with this slide is really how important and interconnected wireless now is. Whether you talk about municipal services, right now in the U.S., the United States Department of Transportation actually put out a grant, the $65 million grant, competitive effort. Columbus ended up winning it for smart city solutions. Wireless is really the backbone.
No, I got to see her.
Infrastructure there was developed in Columbus. You look at from the workforce and the individuals, at this conference in particular, talking about smart growth and what's happening in the villages, live, work, play, other components of smart growth. Think about who is actually living in those communities and working in those communities. Wireless connectivity is a critical piece of the equation in terms of services that they're looking to be provided and how they're being delivered. The other component, when you look at mobile broadband just generally as an economic driver, right now, just looking at the app economy, it's since I think 2015, it's a $120 billion a year industry in the United States. And a lot of folks, when you think about the app industry, you think Silicon Valley. The reality is that New York is a huge concentration of app development. I think 10% of all new applications are actually developed in the greater New York. Just looking at some of the sectors that are benefited by wireless connectivity, finance being one. I'll give you a quick example. Coming out here for this particular conference yesterday, I was looking for a hotel. I went on my iPhone, I have an app, I found it really quick. I paid with Apple Pay. I put the directions into my calendar, so in 3 clicks, I had a hotel room reserved, paid for it, knew exactly where I was going. Financial services industry, if you look at mobile pay, is really a huge burgeoning industry. It's going to really change the way in which consumers actually pay for goods and services. Utilities, I'm sure at this conference and prior conferences, smart grid's been talked about a lot. One example, especially when we get to the municipal level, there's a huge effort with retrofitting lighting and going to LED. Studies have shown that there's actually a 30% increase in efficiency on energy usage when you're actually connected and using wireless technology to be able to turn the lights on and off when you do. A couple other statistics just in healthcare, telemedicine. Think about wearable devices, patients and doctors being connected through wireless technology. That industry in and of itself is growing demonstrably. It's a $200 to $300 billion global industry a year. And how we actually engage with healthcare providers, home healthcare is going to dramatically change in the next several years based on the availability of wireless technology. For retail, I think it was mentioned actually at the conference, I think this is the first year with Cyber Monday and Black Friday where over 50% of all purchases were actually purchased on a mobile device. So you can start to see what's happening, at least in terms of the economic side. This particular slide, I think this is important not just in mobile, but I think it really starts to tell the story. What's happening in the workforce trend? I'm right on the cusp of a boomer and an Xer, right? I'm what would be called a digital immigrant. I didn't grow up with,
That was good.
I didn't grow up with wireless technology. My kids have, and they're what's called digital natives. And their expectations are substantial when it comes to access and availability and speed. They expect that to work all the time, wherever they are. They don't have patience for it when it doesn't work. And I think when you look at what's happening, when you use the term millennials, which are typically 18 to 34-year-olds, look at what's happening in the workforce. In another year or two, I think millennials are going to be more than 50% of the workforce. Most millennials are digital natives. So you think about how they're used to and accustomed to working. Mobile is a part of the equation where they're, regardless of their demographics, their background, where they're coming from, what part of the country, they're used to working in a mobile environment. I didn't put it on the slide, but it's a digital pioneer. And to give you a sense in the mobile industry itself, so think about what's happening in the transformation of all these different economic sectors. Think about what is happening with actual demand and usage. Mobile broadband data, what we're all using every day and consuming as consumers, is going up exponentially. This particular slide on the left is exabytes per month of global data demand in mobile networks in 2015 to 2020, and it's 53% compounded annual growth over that period. I didn't put it on the slide, but that's a 700% increase over the next 5 years. And the last several years have continued to show this trend that's upward. On the right side of the screen, what I tried to show you is that if you just think about, go back to maybe the Gordon Gekko day of wireless usage, when you think about machine-to-machine wireless connectivity, wearable devices, smartphones, the amount of usage that those devices enable is 7 times typical in terms of the wearable device, smartphone, 41 times the mobile data demand traffic. So these are drivers right now of what's happening in terms of the overall wireless ecosystem. This is just a slide to give you some quick statistics. I can provide you more. The resources are there really to give you a sense of how this is all connected in terms of wireless as an essential service. 70% of all 911 calls are placed on a wireless device. We're almost at the point where 50% of U.S. households are wireless only. We don't have a typical landline anymore. And in New York, we've done a number of studies, independent economic studies, to look at the tax and fiscal benefits of the wireless industry on state and local economies. $2.4 billion annually in New York State and local tax revenue. And this is just from the cellular industry. This is not other components of the wireless industry. And then looking at some of the productivity gains that are actually available when you have access to good quality, robust mobile broadband. So how do you deliver all of that? It requires infrastructure. Digital infrastructure is really a key conversation in a smart wireless city. When we talk about 21st century downtowns, think about sewer, electric, water as the standard utilities. It would be hard-pressed in today's environment for someone to say that wireless or broadband generally is not an essential service. One of the things that's critical, I think, for our discussion is that unlike those other types of utilities, these services are not provided by rate-regulated utilities, they're not provided by government. They're actually provided by the private sector in a very competitive environment. That's the U.S. policy. So when we look at what is the wireless industry in a competitive model going to have to do to meet this demand, this particular slide, when we talk about digital infrastructure, we tend to show you the amount of additional infrastructure that's going to be required to deliver those types of services and future growth. So on the left, as of 2012 in the United States, there were a little under 300,000 cell sites in 2012. To meet that exponential demand curve, predicted by 2019, we will need 4.3 million cell sites to try to handle that traffic in these wireless networks, which consumers are demanding, which are providing those economic benefits. Some of the good news is that it's not 4.3 million towers, it's 4.3 million facilities. And I just use this slide to give you a sense of some things you probably already know and then some things that are coming. Towers, maybe a camouflage tree or a location on a water tank. And then on the lower part, rooftop mounts and other types of facilities. What you've probably seen, and I know you've seen in Long Island, you're starting to see some what we would call distributed antenna systems. This is where, the slide on the right, there's an antenna attached to the top of the utility pole, a cabinet attached to the pole. A number of infrastructure providers are actively building out these systems in Long Island and across the country. They are looking to provide access points for the wireless carriers in the right-of-way because in order to deliver all this service, the infrastructure itself has to get closer to the people using the network. In order to get closer, it gets a little smaller, but it's got to get a lot denser in terms of the actual overall community. Then on the bottom right, this slide is very difficult to see, but if you look on the middle there, that's actually an operator small cell. So for example, an AT&T, in certain environments, can mount a small box with a transmission capability to provide very localized services. So this would look like a courtyard where maybe you had 200 or 300 people that were active there at times, and you would be able to provide a very small, discrete transmission. And on the far right, I just put this up, but this is a huge part of the equation. In-building services, about 80% of all mobile communications are originated or terminate in a building. So it's not just the exterior, it's the actual interior infrastructure necessary to provide robust wireless service. Some resources, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Scott. In order to be able to roll out this level of infrastructure, it's going to require a lot of communication, no pun intended, collaboration, and education, and that requires work by our industry and our membership at the very local level. I think many of the folks who spoke on the day ago talked about that local communication and how that is critical. In order to be able to provide resources, our organization, we have some on the website, I'm obviously always available, but there are also federal resources, and some of them I pointed out. We have an affiliation with the Wireless Infrastructure Association, which is national. We recently published a paper. I chair a committee there to really talk about municipal best practices, and some of those include policy, streamlining right-of-way access provisions, looking at outdated zoning codes, which were really built to keep out towers, which now really need to be revised to welcome in small cell technology. These are the kinds of things that I think on a very local level, we're interested in and encouraged by having that conversation locally so that we can advance the conversation, allow the infrastructure to come in a very reasonable way, make sure we protect community interests, and deliver on all these economic benefits and promises that we're on this board.
Thank you, Chris, appreciate it, really informative. All right, I'm just going to open up with a couple of questions that I had. We always talk about the 21st century downtown, but how do we define it? Maybe I can look it up so transparency would like to take
I think you have all the elements of it. Being progressive with communication is important to people in the downtown area. We want to have that available for sure. We want to have a welcoming place. We want to have it safe, if possible. We want to have it be vibrant, attractive, pleasing. We want to have all the aesthetics are very, very important. So we have the beautification committee, for example, in the town. 30, 40 members of that. We make the village purchases, flowers, and it has a huge impact.
I guess that's when you go by on the railroad, that's what people say.
Well, you see the major developments, and they've taken that on as part of their responsibilities to do that, and they've done a wonderful job. So you see that they make a significant investment. When they have the investment, they're going to make sure that people are felt welcome to that investment. It's the same type of thing in the downtown area. You want to have that from the infrastructure standpoint. You want it to be the community to be walkable. You want to have. We've done a great deal with new sidewalks, pavers. A lot of it paid for with federal money through the county, and that's been a very integral part of the redevelopment. You want to make sure it's well lit, so people feel safe. You want to make sure you have good communication with the police department. And we want to make sure that our code officials locally are following the quality of life in the downtown areas with dumpster issues, because when you have increase in people, you have increase in business, you have increase in waste stream. So you need to manage that as well. So the aesthetics on all of this to become a welcoming place and a downtown where people want to come to as a destination, all those aesthetics are integral to the success of those people that are behind the storefront. And our responsibilities are outside of those in the parking areas and making sure those areas are well managed.
Thank you. Warren, anything you want to add?
Well, I think there's no magic bullet to making a 21st century downtown. I think it's done by hard work and addressing certain issues. And I do agree with Chris that communications is the name of the game, and it's changed our entire world. It's ironic because about a week and a half ago I was away in Iceland for 5 days with my wife. We wanted to see the Northern Lights. That didn't happen. We had a great trip. But the most interesting thing that was said to me with regard to this subject was the tour guide had said to me that they were looking forward to the first Black Friday and Cyber Monday. It is, but don't think that Iceland is in the dark all the time. Well, it's true, you have your breakfast in pitch black at 10 in the morning. They're a very progressive society, so they see the need for that as well. But I want to come back to the point about the no magic bullet. On Long Island, we have 97 villages and 14 towns. We represent almost 3 million people. So putting things together is not always easy. It's somewhat bureaucratic, and it takes a lot of wisdom to get people to understand your needs and whatever. So again, I think it behooves us to not to think as these things as NIMBYism, not in my backyard. It's just as simple of sorting out all the issues that come before you and trying to achieve the best thing for your municipality. I know right now, the villages, and especially the village of Mineola, has an enormous building project going on right across the street from their courthouse in the main Old Country Road, which is a main thoroughfare. The village of Farmingdale, right on the railroad tracks. The village I represented was always on the railroad tracks. It's been there since 1870 going through. But we've always allowed second stories on the apartments or the building, I apologize, on the businesses down on the first floor. A lot of villages haven't done that yet. But then too, there is also a lot of villages will have no need for downtowns. Of the 64 villages in Nassau County, we have 35 villages that have populations of 3,000 or less. They're essentially bedroom communities. They have no need for it, so you're not going to hear from them. The major villages have done what they've always done, is address the fact that they need the railroad, because again, people do have to get into New York City, which is the major business community, and they work in with those things. Parking then becomes an important project. There is so little parking along. In fact, I've been in a number of countries all over the world. Parking is always the #1 concern. I've been in England, France, Ireland. It's always parking. In fact, just change a little bit. We were one of the first villages to adopt a parking system from Ireland, wherein you scratch off a ticket and it gives you the date and whatever, and you didn't put it on the window of your car. The code enforcement officer checks that, and if it meets the day of the week, then you're all right. If not, you're going to get a ticket. So there's always new things going on, and not all these municipalities are going to hear the same story. Why would the village of Hempstead, with 65,000 people, want to do the same thing as the village of Newark Park with 9,000 people? And at the same token, why would we want to do the same thing as Farmingdale? It's because you have different needs, and those people have to understand. I thought the supervisor from you gotta excuse me, I'm the senior. Babylon. From Riverhead sort of put his finger on the pulse when he said, we have a big box store here that's going to be a problem in years, and you're absolutely right. He also said there were some other things happening that won't happen to any other community but his. And that's important to understand. Every community is different, and you want to get the pulse of the people and figure out what they need and what they want. Or else you're going to have empty storefronts, and I think it's Mayor Cavallaro from Westbury had said, the bottom line is that he's only got 3 empty stores in his community. But I think you have to appreciate, well, we all applauded Mayor Cavallaro and the Village of Westbury for winning the $10 million grant. We think there's something wrong with that system, though, because when you take Long Island as a region and you only award $10 million to one of those municipalities, that means that 96 villages and 14 towns are not getting 1 iota of help from the state government. And I hate to say this, but I think, well, I wish all the villages and all the municipalities lots of luck in moving forward into the 21st century. All the municipalities on Long Island, in the governmental sense, have not had a raise in their unrestricted state aid since 2008. That ultimately is just going to restrict them from looking at downtowns as we go down the line. But there are many other pluses that go with it, and I think that every board will accept the developer as they come in and at least listen to them. And I think from that, then you go forward from there. So, Scott?
Good point, good point. No, you have to listen. Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, as I said, communication is the key. And from my perspective, which is a little bit more the private sector, right? It is about leadership at a governmental level to tackle some of these forward-looking issues and being courageous at times to be able to look at policies and look at regulations. And I think with respect to at least broadband communications and particularly mobile, because it's uniquely service delivered by the private sector, but it's so critical to downtown vitality. Conversations with the infrastructure and operators, providers, is really a part of that equation. And what I mean by that is it's a capital-intensive effort to build out that type of wireless network infrastructure. And municipalities actually have an opportunity to be able to work with those providers to change the equation. And what I mean by that is not taxpayer-funded efforts. I mean the cost it takes to actually get access to right-of-way, the time it takes to get through a process. Clearly, there's going to be a municipal interest from the public that has to be respected. At the same time, I think there are a lot of things that can be done to break down some of those barriers that might exist. And that's a conversation that I think gets lost at times because, especially mobile, it's hard to kind of feel tangible aspects of what it's providing.
Thank you. All right, I just have one more question, then I'll open it up. I come from the Smithtown Kings Park area, and one of the elements I have is the frustration and the length of time that it takes to get something accomplished. What can be done to make these downtown projects move a little bit faster? All right,
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we had a BOA grant, the Brownfield Opportunity Area grant to begin with, and then the planning took place on that. And once you get the planning done, you have to have the political will to implement. And fortunately, in our place, we did have that political will to implement and to make the changes. And that appropriate planning up front is very, very key to this. And you can't take forever. I mean, I've heard the stories of projects languishing for 20 years, 15, 20, 30 years. And you have to have the political will to make if it's infrastructure investment, that's the responsibility of the government. If it's private sector investment, you might not get the private sector investment unless you make the infrastructure investments. Paul Pontieri in Patchogue was very successful because he made a significant investment in infrastructure. He was getting grants from different sources as well to provide storage flow to get density in the downtown area. So those are the type of things that are really necessary.
If I could add to that, you have to have the right balance. You heard this morning some very positive statements made by two of the supervisors with regard to the IDAs. And they're right, that's part of the government that you need to make this whole thing work. But at the same token, the IDA sometimes can be a detriment. Now, for instance, in the village of Hempstead, Mayor Hall has indicated to me that yes, 37% of all his properties are non-for-profits. So he gets no tax money from them at all. But then he also went on to tell me, but he has a number of apartment houses that when they were put up a great number of years ago, they were given 20 and 30-year abatements on taxes. So that means almost half of his municipality is not sharing, or not sharing, but they're not putting anything into the financial wealth of the community. So you have to find the right balance on all these things, and then it becomes bureaucratic. The law requires, especially in New York State, we have so many laws that the state requires us whenever a municipality wants to do something. You can't have a meeting of more than 3 of your board members without it being called an official meeting, and you have to put notices all over the place. That's restrictive. So somehow you have to find a balance where you can make it move all along. And I do think, though, most municipal officials do find it where it maybe you're still saying, well, it's still taking 2-3 years for this project. It might have been longer if they didn't have addressing though.
But just to re-emphasize a little bit more about the planning work that goes up front. If you do, and the traffic part of the plan is key, one of the keys, and there's a number of keys to it, but the fear of development is over-intensification in neighborhoods. And they call it, in Nassau County, they refer to it as Queensification, I guess you'd say. We don't want this to look like Queens. Well, you know, Nassau County is widely built out, that kind of thing, and you look at the reality of it, you want to manage that properly, and you want to make sure that what you're bringing to the community is not going to overburden it. So, and that it will function and it will work really well. Planning professionals, engineering professionals, I've seen this in a number of occasions where the trust of the community says, that's never going to work. And they hit on it up to the earlier in the mayor's and the supervisor's panel. Kicking off the meeting this morning is that the fear, the naysayers and NIMBYs and that kind of thing, that'll never work, that'll never work. Well, there was a Stop and Shop in South Farmingdale that was put in down there, and they were totally fearful that that was going to be a traffic nightmare. It turned out to be an improvement because they made improvements on the roadways and the turning lanes and that kind of thing, and the traffic flow is even better now with that development. With our developments in Farmingdale, they made some minor modifications at the intersection of Conklin, which is Hempstead Turnpike, that most people know it as, and Main Street. And now we have flow-through. We used to have backups going back blocks, going to the railroad. We have an at-grade railroad crossing, so the at-grade railroad crossing is down, and traffic's backed up there, that backs up northbound, southbound. So, but the traffic engineering people said, put these turning lanes in. Now traffic flows a lot more smoothly with the increase in development. So you have to trust in the engineering people and professionals of those people as well when you go through this process. You have people with notions out there, they have notions about what might happen, and they always seem to be the prophet of doom. So the notions of the prophet of doom, and it's been disproven in many, many cases. I won't say in all, but I would say in many of the cases, professionals are pretty much on it.
You definitely have to keep it open, Bob.
Yes, I think that's a key point. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, Marty Glennon, I started this during that time in SMART and TODs. We always focused on the brain drain, and we heard from a high school kid today. I'm just wondering, do we have the demographics in these downtowns that have been now built? How many of the Gen X's are living in there? Because I was shocked at what was considered affordable housing for a one-bedroom 5 years ago. So we keep saying we got to stop the brain drain, but I don't see, and most of the people that I know that are going to these developments are downgrading. They're selling their homes, going into these developments because it's easier for them to commute. So I don't think we're accomplishing what we need to do to sustain ourselves on Long Island. So I just want to hear if anybody has the numbers, and my guess is from the people that I've spoken to that those numbers, we haven't achieved the numbers that we were looking for. And if not, what are we going to do more to keep these kids on Long Island?
Well, I don't know that we have the answer to that, because that's a rather complex question. You know, it's not only, when you read the papers about why young people can't stay in Long Island, they'll say it's the high taxes and it's the, not the affordable housing. But they also have to recognize these people are coming out of school with tons of loans and things of that nature, and they have to pay exorbitant prices for a lot of the products they buy, because we're an island and it's a little more expensive here than upstate New York. So it's just not the lack of affordable housing that's preventing them from living here. It's other considerations which is somewhat out of our control. When I say our, I'm talking about the general municipalities.
So as the baby boomers die off, we're going to have a lot of vacant homes and properties, is what it sounds like to me.
Well, I think there's another reality to this too. Being in Nassau County, we're close to New York City. And New York City is the economic engine for the whole region. At least if you go an hour out of New York City, you have a tremendous amount of people that commute. And the TOD portion of this is commutable. It's a commutability to a high-paying job. And reverse commutable, we're not seeing a lot of that, at least at this point. Put the third track in, maybe we will. But personally, I'm not convinced that that's going to have a lot of bang for the buck of coming eastbound. It may be, I may be wrong, but that's just my opinion. But when you look at the people that have moved into Farmingdale, we have a really, and Colin, you're here, you can tell me what the age demographics are in the developments, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a very substantial group that are in there, they're fairly young, and that they're commuting to the city, and we've got one car instead of two cars, which is, if it's a couple, that kind of thing. We also put zip cars in. Many people may be familiar with that. It's a predetermined location for rental cars, so you don't need two cars and so on. So, and the rents are not cheap. There's no question about it. The rents are not cheap in the market rate. Even the affordable rents are not what I would cheap. So, but if you don't do it, what else do you do?
One stat just added, it doesn't answer the question fully, right? Because broadband and mobile broadband is going to fully answer that question. If you're trying to attract talent, you're trying to create an innovation economy in the downtown area. One statistic that I know, which really drives home the point of some of the multifamily housing and some of the transit-oriented development, the number two amenity sought by any of the young professionals that you're looking for is broadband. And so that sometimes is lost in the equation. So I look at broadband as a facilitator for creating both from the multi-family housing point of view, but the demographics of the employers that you're looking at. Healthcare needs a big broadband pipeline, right? Local economies that are being developed in terms of even villages. Their demand profile is so significant, so if it's about creating an ecosystem where you're going to attract talent and young talent, and you're going to revitalize downtowns. I think broadband's a big part of that equation.
I'm just going to segue on what you just said, because we've tried in revitalizing downtowns to support small businesses. And I've noticed that many of the small businesses are hybrids. You'll have a storefront, you'll have the bricks and mortar, but they will also have an online identity or link. And in order to have that, you have to have broadband, you have to have the wireless there so that they can run that other part of their business. And I still see some downtown areas or some commercial areas such as Stony Brook Village, where people are still fighting cell towers. And so we go back to the NIMBYism because everyone has a cell phone, but there are groups of people who don't want cell towers. And how are we addressing that? That piece of, we talked about communication. What kind of marketing are you doing to dispel this old, I'm going to be irradiated if there's a cell tower near me? I'm talking about smart people who are still saying this. How is that being addressed? And do you, Brian, in Farmingdale, do you see any of the hybridization of small businesses and having e-commerce as part of their small business plan? And I see this all in a piece when you're looking at the 21st century downtown.
Sure, even part of the restaurants, they're on social media all the time. They're making themselves a destination. Their marketing is changed from advertising in the paper and sending coupons out to social media. So that there's absolutely through broadband and to the cell phone is the way people market.
And even selling some of their products
Products as well.
online.
If they're not there, they need to be. There's no question about it. For somebody's got a small storefront, the amount of trade they're going to get during the day, during the week, because people work. Most people have they're two-income families, for the most part on Long Island as it is. So you need to be able to be competitive and to pay. The rents in downtowns are not cheap, unless the downtowns are in bad shape, so then you have no shot. But until they reemerge. So they need to be progressive in that regard, and using broadband, and using the internet, and using all those tools that are out there to market themselves as an organization, as a viable business. So it's a very integral part of today's downtown businesses as well.
Your question's really dynamic. It's a really good one. So I'm going to try to encapsulate it in a shorter answer that probably doesn't fully give it justice to your question. Broadband. If I look at this conference, we talk about TOD, we talk about smart growth, and those areas where I practice as well. Broadband planning on a very local level is essential. And there aren't a ton of federal resources, we'll see what happens, but there aren't a ton of federal resources right now for that type of local planning. And when you look at where the state is interested in looking at broadband, it's typically been underserved or rural parts of the state. So when we're talking about wireless downtowns, I come back to it's a uniquely local question. There's a lot of resources that can be brought to the table, but the context of the question you gave me about kind of cell towers, and those are typically local zoning forms, which are the wrong time, wrong place to have an educational exchange. So part of our effort at New York State Wireless is to come to events like this where we can share information. I think going back to where it can start is if local leaders see that this is really a huge part of the equation for local economies to thrive and succeed. Invite the broadband providers, whether they be incumbent or mobile providers, to the community. Have the conversations, start to look at planning, start to look at this in a different way where maybe we can have a conversation outside of the zoning form where it's just built around a cell tower and it's not in my backyard. And the acronym I'll give you now with small cells and DAS technologies, it's no longer NIMBY, it's NIMV, so it's not my front yard because the pole's in the front yard, not the backyard.
Take the car back to the civic center.
Yes, go ahead.
When we talk about redeveloping the downtown, we talk about smart growth, transit-oriented development. Everyone looks at two models today. Patchogue, which is Aurora, Suffolk County, and Farmingdale, okay, which is Nassau, Suffolk borderline. I was involved with a group of people who started the visioning process in Farmingdale. We brought in about 14 years ago, Eric and John Adam. You asked for what the magic bullet is. I still believe the magic bullet is what I said 14, 15 years ago. parking. When we were all younger, we all walked with our mothers in the strollers down to downtown and we did our shopping. Today, no one wants to walk to the corner mailbox. We still had a mailbox. I mean, we laugh at it because we all know it's true and it's ironic. Now you just did 2 new parking lots in Farmingdale. Okay, one for employees, a little outside of the downtown area, and one which was proposed for condominiums 12 years ago. The village bought it and they're making it a parking lot. Someone who runs a Facebook page for Farmingdale, constantly everyone complains about parking. I mentioned it to Ralph, I mentioned it to Butch Starkey years ago. Every development that comes in, like our home properties, needs to be paying towards a fund for rehabilitation of parking lots and the possibility of putting 3-tier metal crate parking things where you drive your car in, the car goes up, okay? Because no one's gonna come down. Last week on the news, Tanger Outlets, Deer Park, cops all over the place directing traffic. Why are people fighting to get there? Because you have unique stores with plenty of parking. And people don't realize in their head, even though you're parking 500, 600 yards from the store you're going and then walking from store to store, they're going to do it. But downtown, all they visualize is no parking, narrow main streets. I frequent Patchogue. The main draw is a theater. Farmingdale's main draw is restaurants. The small mom and pop store cannot make it there. There is no traffic. Most people say, why is wireless internet here? Because those stores that don't get the business can stay afloat with the wireless. Wheeling Desk Records, years and years, everyone went from all over Long Island down there to get vinyl records. Now, she lives there and she sells off the internet. Oohs and Ahs, old toys and games, same thing, it was the internet that kept them alive. So you do need the internet, because the magic bullet is parking, and I don't want to make it sound that I'm picking on you, Brian, but you mentioned the Stop and Shop site,
Yes.
which is, I think, 1.2 miles outside the dead center of the village of Farmingdale, beautifying the area. It was a 32-acre Superfund site. Yours truly spearheaded the fight to get that cleaned up. It got a recreational cleanup of a commercial industrial property, never ever done in the state of New York. Only done once in the country, but the EPA was sued and had to pay the property owner the difference in the money for cleaning it up from industrial to recreational, or I think it was residential. So we did something great over there. You mentioned Stop and Shop, we all complained about traffic. Right, you're forgetting, there's 21 acres of undeveloped park there. When 5 athletic fields have mom and pop coming with their kids and mom and pop leaving with their kids all at the same time, Motor Avenue ain't gonna be the same. You mentioned Cross Street, Conklin, Main Street, traffic devices, redoing the timing on lights, putting left-hand turn lanes in. I fought with New York State for probably 10 years before they even decided to go do it. Stephen Labriola was the state assemblyman, so that will tell you how long it is. Parking is the thing. It has to be a fund generated for parking.
We do that substantially in the village. We do, there's an allocation for developers, and then we do have pay for parking. They call it pay for parking, because it goes into a fund to reinvest in new parking facilities. We do that.
One thing to add to the conversation, just looking even forward, right? So parking in downtowns can be a problem. The cost of parking, for purposes of new development, can be a problem. One of the things that I'm fascinated about technology as we move forward is the self-driving car, connected car, how actually technology. Now, there are going to be a lot of questions raised, right, about how do you do that safely and efficiently. But you think about transportation and congestion on Long Island, about autonomous cars and whether or not that can alleviate some of the problems and some of the parking problems. That's a really interesting question going forward for purposes of downtown development.
We are exploring a parking app where people can actually go on the app and see where there's locations. We're looking at that now. It's a little bit forward-looking, I guess, though we are looking at it, but we are at this point trying to explore it. And Also, we have the train station right nearby. The train station is not utilized at night during the week, and it's not utilized very much at all on the weekend. So that, we're looking to connect that to our downtown area, which is only a couple of blocks away, either by walking or providing maybe an internal type of trolley or something. But we're not sure about that. We're evaluating the cost of all of that. Everything is cost-driven, and who's going to pay for it, and how do you work all that out. But to put an intermodal type of connectivity to the train station, so people can park down there. 600-700 spots down there. You can go on and utilize. We have that as a kind of a safety valve for our downtown area, but how to connect that to get people to use it and use it properly, and then be able to bring them to and from Main Street safely. The question that we're asking and trying to get answers to right now.
Your trolley sign.
Yes, in the back.
I'm the director of the Downtown Business Improvement District in Glen Cove, and recently some of the businesses in the downtown came to me and asked about the possibility of getting FiOS in the downtown. Verizon brought in FiOS to the residential areas, but even though many of the businesses downtown signed a petition and we submitted it to Verizon, they said they have no intention of bringing FiOS to the downtown commercial district. And I'm just wondering if you can give me ideas on that. Businesses are hungry for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a bid, or even which has a close relationship, obviously, with a downtown economic environment and a relationship with government, whether through the bid or through government itself, that's a situation where Verizon has a franchise locally, and obviously local municipal officials can potentially be an asset in that conversation. But I would even take it a step further. Whether or not FiOS is the right technical solution on that, or what your bid is looking for, I would encourage you to look at, a bid could even do an RFI. You can look at wireless, fiber. There's a lot of change happening right now, and not to get too far afield, but millimeter wave technology is coming. So there are a lot of things where you can be progressive on this question, get information. It may not be immediate, the solution that you're looking for. And the nearest example that I could give you where, because of the scale, it's a whole different set of challenges. But New York City is about to release an RFI, an expressions of interest, to look at a number of different technical solutions that are forward-looking and deal with mobile and kind of the questions we're looking at. So there are opportunities to do that. So whether it's Verizon FiOS is the answer, or it's a different provider answer, I think you can get there. It just takes a question of putting that together and inviting those who you want to attract and necessarily partner with. And a lot of times it's a public-private partnership to be able to come up with the capital formula that'll work.
I have time for one more question. Anybody? Yes.
I just want to jump back to the previous comment, discussion, full disclosure, I'm from New York City. But I'm wondering, it sounds like there's a little bit of a tension between the issue of providing parking and sort of the issue of like downtown and walkability. And I'm wondering, you talked about the app that people have looked at. I know that, for instance, in New Jersey, people have looked at autonomous vehicle, car sharing and other ways of getting people to the downtown. And I'm wondering if there are other ways that you're thinking about how to sort of merge the need for getting people to the trains and having parking downtown and sort of the walkability and keeping their downtowns vibrant. Are there other technological solutions or other sort of urban design solutions that people are thinking about that make those two things work in the present?
I can't address one specific issue as what everybody's thinking, because all municipalities are different, they have different needs. For instance, in the municipality where I was the mayor, we have 1 square mile is the village of Newark Park. But we have 10,000 people live in that 1 square mile. There is no vacant land in that village at all. Now, we do abut the railroad, and we have limited parking. We can't change that. I think Will Rogers said it many, many years ago, and he was right. Buy land, they're not making it anymore. Everything's been bought up because it has a value. It's almost like what's happening in Suffolk County. All the farms are being bought up because they want them for people to live. But I don't have again, that's part of my statement that we don't have a magic bullet to solve these problems. Every community has to be looked at differently. My village is contiguous with the village of Floral Park and the village of Garden City. They have different needs completely from us. The village of Garden City's got 25,000 people, Floral Park has 17,000 people. They're fortunate with regard to their parking. When the forefathers of Newark Park were putting the village together in 1927, they made a grand mistake. They made their business district to be 100 feet off Jericho Turnpike, which is the main route, Route 25. 100 feet off that is the business district. They never made any provisions for behind those municipalities for parking. Consequently, all you have is street parking. There are business owners that will put their car in front of that store all day long because they want a place to park, not realizing that every time you do that, you lose about $300 a day in revenue, which could have been your potential customer. But I'm not dwelling on that, I'm just saying, it's not an easy fix. I can't speak for all the municipalities, but everyone has sort of...
Connect that potentially with some type of vehicular term, maybe call it a truck, that kind of thing. But every municipality is unique in that regard. And then try to tie that together with people who don't know you're downtown and want to come there, go to your restaurants and that kind of thing, with an app that can tell you where parking may be available, where maybe, and parking management is a whole other very long discussion about how to do that. And then Patchogue's done a lot of research at Coach F, but I used to be with Coach F too, done a lot of research on that as well. In other communities, Rockville Center is very, very intimate with parking regulations and metered parking and that kind of thing. So parking management and involving metered parking and that kind of thing in the future may be part of the equation.
Chris, final comment?
It's a great question, and I think especially when you're looking at suburban environments, which were typically, based on ICE-T funds and highway planning going back so long, built in with the car line, right? So a lot of what these villages and towns are doing, which is really to be commended, is they're recreating a different environment where density, trying to get people a little bit closer to a little bit more of a downtown environment. And much for my automobile, it's really critical. It's a time equation at some point, right? About where there's shifts in terms of how the planning comes into play. But one, maybe shameless plug for our sponsors, AT&T. Smart City Solutions, sensors, transportation planning, ways to get cars off the streets and make parking more efficient. They have a whole group that focuses on those types of solutions for cities, and essentially it's providing the services that constituents want and trying to be able to provide an environment right now with what you do have that's more efficient.
Also playing with park culture. I know that's the toughest part.
All right, real quick. Go ahead.
How do we make walking more efficient?
Come on, Mike, you gotta walk it.
It's healthier for people. I mean, we can bring that to people's attention that walking and making it more efficient. Why do we make it so easy to do? Just sit back and take these steps. So we walk a mile.
All right. Sorry. Well, thank you everybody for coming.